All right, welcome back. Welcome to my apartment for a change instead of a parking garage. I'm gonna make a little impromptu video today about inline figure skating gear, pretty much everything about gear that I can think of while I change my wheels. So I thought I'd take this as an opportunity to talk about it while I'm actually doing it. One of the only downsides about inline figure skating to me is that your gear makes a pretty big difference, and it's dependent on like what surface you're skating on, kind of what skills you're doing also. So it's really helpful to understand how all of the different components of your gear are working together and to be able to identify any issues. It might be your skating, you might be come across an issue with your technique or something that you think is your fault. It might be your gear. It can sometimes be the wheels that you're using, the floor that you're skating on, your toe stops, whatever it may be. So I'm going to talk about all of the different components, all of the different like variables that go into all that, and let's just get into it and I'll talk about it as we go. So I have a 3-wheel setup right here. Why don't we just start talking about what I actually skate on? These right here are my busted up Resport RF1s. They're super ugly and unlaced right now, and they're also duct taped across the front of the tongue because the tongue is kind of ripping. Not good. I'm probably going to need to replace these within some time, whenever I can make it work. I probably should have replaced them like a month ago or so, but we're gonna ride these things out. They were $700. I can't afford to replace them every single time they start showing any signs of wear and tear. So this is my Resport RF1 boot. It's a pretty high level boot. It might have been a little bit of a bold choice for me. I think I might have been a little over booted at first. I'm not saying over booting isn't a thing, but I didn't really care. I kind of just worked through it. If you're like really determined, you can break in a pair of really high level skates. It hurts. I'm not going to say it didn't hurt. It was so painful. The first few months especially, I would take these off and my feet were just throbbing in pain, and they were just like so hard. I mean, you can knock on them, but now they have a little give to them now that I've broken them in. They're a little more comfortable. Yeah, so my boots. Then I have the frame that's on these, which is the Rollline Linnea frame. I would say it's probably the best frame on the market, honestly. By far my pick. Oh, don't touch the mic. Yeah, I would say by far this is my top pick for a frame. It's the only one I've ever tried, so I can't really say anything else. But it is the most expensive, I will say that. It's a little bit more expensive than the others, although it's not that much more expensive than the others. But one special thing that it has on it is this middle wheel right here where you can see this kind of octagon. Let's see if I can actually show you. This kind of octagon piece in the middle right there with the numbers is actually a setting that lets you change the rocker. So this middle wheel will move forward, backwards, up or down, kind of like in this circular motion. And that kind of allows you to adjust the rocker. So you basically get to choose what blade you're skating on. And they actually have 3 of these different settings are figure skating settings, and they have like equivalent blades. So the one that I have right now is number 3. It's the most rockered and it's the most centered. So the wheel is right between the middle, or the middle wheel is equally spaced between the front and back wheel, and it's a little bit down. So the rocker is a little bit more dramatic, and you kind of put your weight towards the middle of your foot rather than towards the front or back. But you can adjust that if you would rather have your weight towards the back or towards the front. I've messed around with that a few times, and I think I like 3 the most. Sometimes I change it thinking that it's going to help, and then it actually makes it a little harder. So I say just pick one and stick with it. So it's not like a huge thing that I use all the time to change the rocker on it, but it is pretty helpful. You can also adjust the rocker on your skates if you have another frame that doesn't have that option, such as like Snow White's pick skates. I think you could do this with. You can actually adjust the rocker with the size of the wheel. So you can get like a bigger wheel in the middle to make the rocker a little bit more dramatic. It'd be a smaller rocker technically, and that would give it a little bit more maneuverability. Likewise, you could also put like a larger wheel on the front, which would kind of pitch you back towards your heel, I believe, but I've never messed around with that, so I can't tell you exactly what size wheels to use. You'll kind of have to experiment. Also on the front of these, I have Rollline toe stops. This is the Cappuccino toe stop. I actually just ordered new ones. They have one that's black in color, and it says that it's only for triples and quad jumps, but whenever I looked at the comparison specs, I thought that it looked like what I would kind of want. I think these are a little bit too sticky. They're meant for jumping, and they're meant to be really grippy and rebounds. They're meant to give you a lot of rebound off of the ground, but they're very sticky. So whenever I spin, my spins slow down really fast if I drag it just a little bit too much. And they're a little bit grippier than I really even need for jumps, to be honest, because the wheels that I use indoors are also pretty grippy. So I have gotten a replacement for that, and I'm gonna try to start using the black toe stops. Let's start actually changing my wheels. I do change my wheels when I skate indoor and outdoor. So right now, these are my outdoor wheels. I'm gonna take one off and we'll compare the difference between them. For outdoor skating, I like a harder wheel, not only because you usually have more grip on an outdoor surface, such as like asphalt or concrete or something like that, but also a softer wheel outdoors will break down much faster. So if I were to use something that was like a little bit softer than this, they would break down within, I mean, probably a month of me outdoor skating, just 2 or 3 times a week at most. I'd probably need new wheels, and I probably should replace these right now, but they're holding on. They're okay. So I'll compare my indoor and outdoor wheels, and I'll talk about which ones I use, which ones I've tried. Also, I should mention, I have one singular blog post, but it's about everything I know about figure skating, inline figure skating gear. So it has boots, frames, wheels, toe stops, everything that I could possibly find and everything I could possibly imagine. And so if you really want like a quick reference guide for any of that, I will leave a link to that blog post in the description of this video so you can go back and look at it. It has kind of like a review of also all of the gear that I've tried, so I might not go over like everything that I've ever tried before in this video. But what I can say is that what I've kind of landed on as far as the wheels that I use, for outdoor skating, I use these. They are Speed Max. I believe that these are what come with the Snow White frames, and they also have a softer counterpart called the Spiral wheel. To my knowledge, the Spiral and Speed Max wheels are both the exact same profile, and I'll get into what that means, but they're the same shape, basically. They're just softer and harder, so you can also use the Speed Max and the Spiral wheels. I have not been able to get Spiral wheels in the US for quite some time, about 3 months. I used to use those for indoor skating. Well, I didn't used to switch my wheels at all. I used to use Spiral for indoor and outdoor sometimes, but they broke down really fast outdoor because they're softer. I have not been able to get the Spiral wheels in the United States anymore. I've sent an email seeing if they're gonna restock them ever. But yeah, if you live outside of the US, you can definitely get them online. You can get them in the US, but you have to pay European shipping. And for a pair of wheels, like a set of 6 wheels, I think it would be like $30 extra for the shipping, which I didn't really want to do. So I decided if I was going to spend that amount of money, I would rather just upgrade to a nicer wheel. So this is what I use indoor. This is, let's show you the difference. These right here are the Rollline Zero wheels. It's the only inline wheel that Rollline makes, but they are pretty nice. I really like them. I will say, if I show you the difference, granted these Speed Max wheels are pretty worn down right now, but if I show you the difference, you can see that the Rollline wheel has a much thinner, kind of pointier profile. The profile is this view of the wheel, basically, how pointed, how round, flat it is on the outside where it's going to be touching the ground. So this one is a lot thinner, and it's got a lot more of a kind of pointed round top to it. It's not like pointy, like sharp at all. But if you look at it compared to this one at this point is almost completely flat, and there's kind of benefits, there's ups and downs to both. I still get pretty good edges with these wheels, even though they look pretty flat. I actually can lean kind of on the actual edge of the wheel, and so that actually kind of makes your edges feel a little bit more controllable. But these make your edges feel, the Rollline wheels make your edges feel a lot more effortless, but they are a lot more sensitive. So you don't have to lean as hard, you don't have to push as hard onto an edge for it to do the same thing. But if you push a little bit too hard, there's not really much to get you back on track. It's a little bit like playing on hard mode. I believe these Rollline wheels were actually modeled after ice skating to try to get the same physics as ice skating. And so I think this is about as close as you can get to the feeling of ice skating so far, from what I can tell. But honestly, you'll adjust to any wheel pretty much. I don't even think there's a huge difference between regular inline wheels and inline figure skating wheels. There's definitely a difference between like the Rollline wheel and a normal recreational wheel, but you can learn basic figure skating stuff in pretty much any wheel, honestly. As long as it's round on the bottom, you can lean on it, it'll be fine. These again are 72 millimeters. Let's go over the specs that you should look at for a wheel. There's pretty much 3 main things that I would look at for a wheel. Those are the durometer, the size of the wheel, and the profile. So like I said, the profile is, if you look at it head on, the part that's going to be touching the ground, how flat, pointy, rounded is it? These are both 72 millimeters. This one is 82A. Your A is going to be your durometer. Your durometer is how hard or soft your wheel is going to be. So basically how much grip it's going to give. The softer the wheel is, the more grippy it's going to be. The harder, the more slippery it's going to be. These are 82A, and if you look at pretty much any wheel, you should be able to see somewhere written on the side, it'll say that. I don't know if you can read. I hope you can read. This one right here is 82A, and the Speedmax wheels are 89A. And so these are a lot harder. You can even feel the difference. Like these have a little bit of a give to them. They almost feel kind of gummy. And these are pretty hard. They feel like pretty solid plastic. Even just that difference between 82 and 89, if I take these to the rink on a smooth, polished concrete floor, I can barely do anything without slipping and falling. If I tried to go for like a loop jump or something, I've done that many, many times where I try to set up for a loop and I pull in and the edge just slides right out from under me. So I had to stop using just these. It's actually a good thing because I actually rotate my wheels now, which you should really, really do. You can get like 5 times longer out of a wheel, especially outdoors, if you just rotate them between uses. Pretty much every practice, I would say. Like every time you've gone out and skated for, say, an hour or so outside, you should rotate your wheels when you're done because they will wear down very unevenly. And once they get to a certain point and you try to rotate them and even them back out, it's going to be like you can't even skate at all in them. So definitely do that. And what I have done also is every time I buy a new set of wheels, I label them. So I write on Sharpie, I write 1, 2, and 3, and then left and right. So I have R1 right here, and then R2, L2, L3, so on, you know. So when you're rotating your wheels, you want to go front to back. So you want to switch out 1 and 3 basically is how I label it. 2 stays in the middle usually for me. If it starts to wear down unevenly, you can just kind of look at it and try to switch them out. And honestly, I try to have a system where I space them out evenly, or I rotate them evenly every single time I use them. But you don't always skate the same way every time. Sometimes your wheels wear down a little bit differently. So like, for example, this skate right here, you can see one of the wheels has the logo facing out towards the outside edge. The other 2 have the bare side of the wheel facing out. And that's because this wheel, the front wheel, had worn down kind of in the opposite direction. So I flipped it around so that it would have the same kind of wear down pattern as the rest of the wheels. Your inside edges on your skates will almost always wear down a lot quicker, unless you're practicing like just outside edges for hours. Most of the time when you skate, you're pushing off of an inside edge and you're kind of like, if you're doing basic forward stroking or something like that, you're usually mostly on your inside edges. So those will wear down a lot quicker. So I like to flip them also from inside to outside edge. So like taking it out this way and flipping it around like that so that the logo is on the other side. So you go front to back, flip it left to right, or, you know, inside to outside. And I also flip the wheels, or I rotate the wheels from skate to skate. So I'll take this one from here, put it here, if that makes any sense. That's really mostly for my outdoor wheels. My indoor wheels don't wear down much at all. I've had these for, oops, that's an outdoor wheel. I've had my roll line wheels for 2 or 3 months now, and I always try to look at them and see if I can tell where it's been worn down. I can't really tell. I don't think that there's not enough of a, you know, slope on this wheel for me to be able to say which side I should put it on. So I don't think that really matters a whole lot. But every time I take my other wheels off, I always look at them and try to see which side is worn down most. And I take the side that's worn down the most and put it to where it's facing the outside edge. That way they wear down more evenly. These actually, I'm kind of proud of how these wheels have worn down because usually they get very sloped and slanted. And these so far are pretty flat. I don't think I've ever worn them down like to where they're flat and not slanted on one side. They're like a tiny bit sloped towards this side. So next time I'll put this towards the outside edge, I'll flip it backwards. And it's funny because whenever I changed these out yesterday and I had the worn down side facing to the outside edge, and now the worn down side is on the inside edge again. So it's already ready to be flipped after 2 or 3 hours of skating. Now taking the wheels off will probably change depending on what frame you have. With my inline frames, they give you a bag of tools, which has a bunch of different Allen keys in it. I don't know if you can see this, but it's pretty simple. You just put the Allen key where it goes, loosen it up, take the little axle out, and that's it. It's really not difficult by any means. The middle wheel is a little bit different because there's a different part on it, so you have to use like a wrench. But again, it's really simple. It's not something that you wouldn't be able to figure out by looking at it. So I'm gonna just take all of these wheels out, and then I'll start replacing them with my indoor wheels. I'm gonna get dust all over my pants, I bet, from having these sitting on myself. And so here we go. We have a wheelless frame. Oh, I talked about all of the different parts of the wheels, all the different like factors, and then I didn't even talk about what they do. So your durometer is your hardness. That's gonna make your wheels grippier or like more slippery, kind of how I said before. The size of your wheel is going to give you more or less speed and a little bit more or less maneuverability. The maneuverability also has to do with the profile of the wheel, which again is the kind of shape that's touching the ground. For me, the largest size that this frame fits, which this is a 9 3/4 size Linnea frame if it matters. The largest size that I can put on this is 72 millimeters, so that's what I use. I have thought about switching to 68 millimeters. If these wheels were not a little bit expensive, I think these wheels are $70, which is a lot, but they've lasted me a really long time. What I will say, do not buy the Roll-Line wheels if you are skating outdoors primarily. You can buy them, you can use them inside, but do not use these wheels outside. They are very soft, and they do come in two hardnesses. They come in 82 and 87, I believe. But these are not solid plastic the same way that the Speedmax wheels are. So these are the same material all the way through. Whenever it wears down, it's just cutting away at the same thing. It's one solid piece pretty much. Or at least there's this middle kind of, I don't know what you call this. It's like the hubcap. These, on the other hand, you can already see the inside of it is hollow. So there's not as big of a hubcap. I don't actually know what that part is called. But the middle part is a little bit larger, so there's less of the material on the outside. And this part of the wheel is layered. So it's not the same plastic all the way through. I think that there's like a less dense plastic on the inside of it that makes it have a little bit more rebound. And then on the outside, it's a little bit squishier. So once this outside layer, and you can really feel the squish of this wheel almost, once that outside layer starts to wear down, these things fall apart. I might have a picture of it somewhere, but these came with my frames when I first got them, and I did not know better than to use them outside. And I think after like 2 months or so, which is a decent amount of time, but after about 2 months or so, they wore down to the point that I was literally skating on one of the wheels, and not only was I finding pieces of the wheel on the ground, like strips of the outside of the wheel, it had worn down to like the very, very base, like a nub of a wheel. And it was really funny, actually. I had like 2 or 3 wheels that looked exactly like this, and then one that was literally like this big. It was just the very, very outside of this part. And they were just torn to pieces. So these do not last well outside since they don't have the same material all the way through. These are really just for inside skating, I would say, or on a very smooth surface. Also, they are a lot more sensitive. Like even inside on a pretty smooth floor, I can feel every little bump and crack and crevice on the floor. And that's not a bad thing. It gives you a little bit more kind of feedback of about how you're skating. But skating outside with them is kind of like teeth chattering. It's a little bit like, so I wouldn't really recommend those for outdoor skating. I haven't tried the 87 or 89. I think it's 87. I haven't tried the harder wheel yet for Roll-Line, but I would imagine still with the way that they're made, you would not want to use them outside. Also, Roll-Line, if you are listening out there, I know you're probably not, but I would love if you would make a wheel like the Speedmax that is solid all the way through, but with the profile of the Linnea, because I really like the profile of this wheel, although it is a little bit trickier. Once you get used to it, it's a lot of fun because you just have a lot more control over your edges. But them wearing down, like, I can't use these outside ever. It's kind of a good thing for me to have to switch my wheels though, because then I actually rotate them. Okay, let's organize these wheels now. So I have R3, whoa, that's the row of the wheel. I have R3, R2, L1, L3, L2, this has to be R1. Okay, how I usually do it, like I said, 1 and 3 go on the front and back, 2 goes in the middle, so I'm just gonna put the 2s on there. Since these don't wear down much at all, I always put the logo towards the outside just because I think it looks nicer that way. I always tighten them down by hand, but make sure that you actually tighten them down with a wrench at the end, because there have been times when I've been skating. Actually, I lost one of the nuts, or one of the washers for this wheel because I tightened them down by hand, and when I was at the rink, my wheel fell off, and then I realized not only did I have to go chase down my wheel that was like rolling across the floor, I had to have somebody help me look for the washer. They called out on the speaker. They're like, if you find a washer on the ground, like somebody's missing their parts. Anyways, I'm gonna put 1 in the back for right now and 3 in the front. Usually I keep track of which one is which, but because these wheels don't wear down much inside, it doesn't really matter how I rotate them. I keep 2 in the middle just to stay organized, but it's not really a big deal. These wheels give me a much better grip on the ground whenever I'm skating inside now. And I skate on a polished concrete floor. It's pretty slippery. I've heard other people that skate on wood floors have come to that rink and said that the floor is like really slick. You'll have to buy wheels based on where you're skating, kind of. And I think that a lot of people who compete, like say they go to the World Championships or whatever, they'll show up with a few different wheels and a few different toe stops just in the off chance that the floor is really sticky or slippery or whatever it is. Because I always wonder, I don't know how they show up to competitions and just go out there and compete and stuff, because it takes a while sometimes to adjust to a new wheel or a new floor or something like that. So you really, if you're competing, you really want to have your backup options, I would say. All right, easy as pie. We have 3 wheels on this now. Oh, did I put them? Oh my gosh. I'm so stupid. I literally just put all, I thought that I was putting the logo to the outside of the frame. I put it on backwards. I'm gonna fix that because I'm an OCD freak. Maybe I shouldn't say that about myself. All right, here we go. We have 3 wheels. They should roll like this whenever you spin them. That means your bearings are good, which I'm not even gonna get into bearings, but personally I use Bones Reds. They're skateboarding bearings, but they're good quality. They're pretty affordable. I think a set of them is like 40 bucks. Which is not cheap, but you don't have to replace your bearings that much, and you should be cleaning your bearings too. If you don't have to replace them if you just clean them. These are probably due for a cleaning. I just cleaned the ones on my Speedmax wheels, so I don't really feel like cleaning these very soon. It's kind of a process. It's not like the worst, but it's a little bit of a process. Let's put the wheels facing the right direction this time. And then I will talk about the toe stop, because your toe stop also matters. Anyways, back to wheel specs. If you have a softer wheel, it's gonna be a little bit easier to hold an edge, to be able to do things like an edge jump, like a really deep edge on, say, a loop takeoff or a salchow or something like that. You're gonna have less of a chance of that edge slipping out from under you, which is good, because that's not a fun fall to have. But it's also stickier, so you don't have any slide on the floor at all, which might seem like a good thing at first, but it actually is kind of necessary for some things. Like, say for spins, you can do a spin with a really sticky wheel or a really soft wheel, and you can hold it for a long time if you're like right on the very top of this front wheel and just barely touching your toe stop to the ground, and you don't rock back and forth at all. But that's really hard. And even if you watch top skaters, top inline figure skaters, they pretty much always rock around on their wheels a little bit while they're spinning. It's pretty rare to see somebody do like a perfect spin on inlines, because they're just pretty hard to maintain. And even just being able to rock around on your wheels and keep spinning is a skill in and of itself. Like, it might make, the spin might look completely fine and solid, but if you watch the wheels, you'll notice that they're doing a lot of adjusting and stuff like that. It's definitely not like ice where you're just kind of, you might make like a little bit of a larger circle or something and pull it back in. With inlines, you're doing what you can to keep spinning. And ideally your spin should be able to just stay in one spot and be like on the perfect balance point, but that's pretty hard. And I think it's even harder because you really have to be on the very front of this wheel, either to the inside or outside edge. And it's a tiny little spot, and it's a lot more forward on your foot than it is on ice skates too. You spin with your toe stop touching the ground, so instead of spinning flat-footed, you're spinning on your toes, which is even harder to maintain. A stickier wheel can kind of make that even harder because there's no slide at all. So if you're spinning, in one spot like this and you catch this middle wheel or something, you're done. It's just gonna stick and you're gonna kind of mess up the spin. You might be able to keep the spin going for a little bit, but it's gonna slow down drastically after that point. Same with your toe stop. If your toe stop is really soft, you will get better grip, which is kind of what you want from a toe stop. It's kind of the point. but it makes you slow down really fast, and you kind of have to have that toe stop touching just a little bit to be able to do a spin. Theoretically, you could balance on just a wheel, but if spinning isn't hard enough on inlines, then not having a toe stop would make it like almost impossible. Speaking of toe stops, since these wheels are a little bit larger, they're actually the same diameter, but I think these have just worn down so much that they are a little bit smaller. Whenever I change these wheels, I usually have to lower the toe stop just a little bit because the extra height kind of makes the toe stop a little further up from the ground. So I'll do that now. I usually like to have my toe stop somewhere between the lowest that I can stand to have it and the highest that it will go, which I know that's kind of like duh. But you don't want your toe stop to be super far off the ground, because when you lean forward for a spin, you want to still have your wheel on the ground. But you want to, really, you should just try to find the balance spot for your spin and then lower your toe stop so that whenever your toe stop is touching the ground, that's where you have to lean forward to. That's probably the best way. I don't have an exact height that I use or whatever. I usually just adjust them, put it on the ground, tilt it back and forth, and see kind of where it is. I do want to make a little contraption that's like I want to make a contraption for like adjusting your toe stop to the exact spot, and I'm thinking like, you know, those door wedges that, you know, it's just like a wedge shape. I want something like that I can slide my skate up to and then have like a certain mark on the wedge so that whenever it hits that spot, that's how I know it's the certain height off the ground. Does that make any sense? Hopefully you get what I mean. But for now, I just kind of feel it out. It's one of those things that makes inline a little bit trickier again, even more so than it already is, because you're kind of having to constantly adjust to your gear. And if you're training in the same place every day, like if you're taking it very seriously and you're training at a rink every single day, then you'll find where you want your toe stop to be and what gear you want to use and all of that kind of stuff. But whenever you're just kind of skating recreationally, especially outdoors, and you're switching from indoor and outdoor gear, it can be kind of tricky to find exactly how you like things. Also, with my toe stops, if you'll notice, they're worn down right now so that there is two kind of flat edges, and if I turn it towards you, you see it doesn't have that on the other side. So I rotate mine basically a half turn whenever I start to wear them down. Some people like whenever they get really slanted, so like whenever this kind of slant goes all the way across the toe stop. And I actually think that I do prefer skating like that, but you get less leeway with how you can adjust your toe stops because you have to always turn it a full turn to be able to use it. And also it wastes a lot of the toe stop. Like you can start grinding down to the metal on these rods, like on these toe stops, and you still have all the rubber left on the other side of it. So to try to save myself a little bit of money and the annoyance of just having to order new toe stops like once every 2 weeks, I rotate them halfway or even a quarter turn. Sometimes I'll rotate them by quarter turns and then they wear down to kind of like a point in the middle where it's like a four-sided pyramid. But I found that rotating them half each time is sufficient and that's fine, and it doesn't really bother me to skate on them like that anyway, so I like to do that. But sometimes like you will see this toe stop right here, you can see it's worn down a lot more on this side than it has here, so this will be lower. So sometimes I will have to adjust it and turn it a little more or less because of the way that it's slanted. And that's one of those things you kind of just have to feel out and know kind of how you want them. I haven't even tested these yet, but I think that that'll be good. Also, it wouldn't be, maybe I should do this. I'm gonna be good since I'm filming this video. I should set a good example. I'm actually gonna rotate my toe stops from left to right and take them all the way out, but that's kind of annoying because then you have to take them all the way out and then you have to recalibrate like how low they are. But I'm gonna do it because they started wearing down a little more unevenly. I think this is my right skate actually, which is kind of surprising. Usually my left one wears down more because spinning on asphalt, that eats through your toe stops faster than anything else, I would say. Even worse than jumping. If I was spinning, like just practicing spins outside, I swear I could probably go through one of these toe stops, especially this cappuccino one, because they're a little bit softer. I could probably go through them in like a week or two. And I have many times, so I've gone through quite a bit of toe stops in my day. So it is a good idea to rotate them left and right because usually there's one spin that you're going to be doing more than the other. Usually that's my left foot, which is my forward spin. I don't do the backspin as much, although I do practice backspins a lot, so they've started wearing down a little bit more evenly as I've gotten better at backspins. Okay, so this one was left. Let's put this here. Let's try not to forget which one was which. I don't label my toe stops really, but I could, I guess. I do use, you'll notice on these roll line ones, they have like a kind of polka dotted pattern on them. I use those dots to kind of line up where the wheel is facing, so that's how I do it. I don't really know how other people do it. There's not a lot of great information about inline skating gear and, you know, how to take care of it, how to set your toe stops up the right way, stuff like that. So that's kind of why I'm making this video and why I made that blog post again, if you want to go check that out. Because there's information out there online, but it's not super easily accessible and it's not super detailed, or, you know, they'll tell you things like the specs and all that, but they don't tell you like, here's how I rotate my wheels, here's how I blah, blah, blah. All right, one toe stop in. I tightened it down even though I don't know if that's where I'm gonna keep it, but I'll have to just test that out later on when I'm at the rink. Or usually I'll test it out like on my kitchen floor before I leave. I'll like either just put them on the ground and look at it and see, does that look good? Or I'll actually put the skates on and try to feel how far forward I need to go on my toe. Let's screw these down in here. It's not a bad idea also to have indoor toe stops, which I think I'm going to use those black toe stops that I ordered. The Roll Line, I think they're just called Roll Line black toe stops. I think I'm going to use those as my indoor toe stops if they work. If not, if they're not very good for indoor skating, then I'll probably make those my outdoor ones and go back to the Ambra. There's another one that's kind of like this. It's a similar color, but it's a little bit darker, and it's called the Ambra. I think that's their most like basic toe stop for pretty much everything. But Roll Line has a bunch of toe stops. You can also get toe stops that are not Roll Line brand, but I just like them. I haven't really found another toe stop that I like more, although I haven't messed around with that as much. But the shape of the toe stop is kind of ideal, and this frame also has a different angle with its toe stops. A lot of the other, well, out of frame, I keep holding it up here. A lot of the other frames, the toe stop points a lot more down, like straight down. So this one, it points a little bit further out a little bit more, kind of like a 45-degree angle almost. And so the Roll Line toe stops just kind of work better because of that. You'll have to wear down the other ones to the right shape if you want them to work well for you, I would imagine. I haven't tried them, so can't say that for sure. Okay, yeah, I think that's about it. The only thing I didn't show you is that inside of these bearings, there are spacers. Actually, I don't even have the spacers on these outdoor wheels because I didn't want to buy a new set of them because they're not very cheap for a piece of metal. It's just a little metal tube, and it holds the bearings apart from each other, but I haven't found it to be 100% necessary. Don't take my word for it. That's probably not a good idea. I should buy bearings or should buy spacers for these wheels, but I've yet to do that. I put the spacers in these wheels, so they are in there. Also, I will say these Roll Line wheels do have like a little bit of a jiggle to them, even whenever I tighten them down all the way. I don't know if that's supposed to happen. I don't know if it's supposed to be like that. These are actually a little bit too thick, and I can't tighten them down all the way without them like not rolling. They won't really move much. I'll try to spin it and it'll just stop. And so I don't know why that used to not be an issue with these wheels, but now it is. Anyways, yeah, I think that's about all that I have to say about inline gear. It's a little bit simpler than quad skating gear. If you've done quad skating, you have your plate, oh gosh, there's a lot of things. On quad skates, you have like a plate, a truck, your cushions. I think it's not like Cushing's disease. You have your cushions. You have wheels also. There's a lot that goes into quad skating sometimes, but with inline, it's pretty much just a piece of metal that holds your wheels, the toe stop. So it's a little bit simpler than quad skating actually. I will say that picking out an inline frame and a boot together was like the most stressful thing. I drove myself crazy trying to pick out which boot I was going to use and which frame even. And I am very happy that I went with the Linneas. I will also say these frames are heavy duty. I'll show you this right now. From where I have like kind of skidded on my outside edge or more likely I've fallen and scraped my edge. the metal right here, I don't know if you can see this, is very worn down. This is like a year and a half of skating in probably like the roughest conditions these things could see. I've, skate in driveways, I skate in parking garages, I do all the things on probably the worst surface that you could probably be on. So these are very heavy duty, and that's the first impression I had whenever I got them out of the box, is that I was like, wow, they're heavy, which they're very heavy also. It makes things a little bit harder, like jumps, I will say, just don't feel as nice. Whenever I put my ice skates on, I'm always like, these are tennis shoes. These don't feel like skates to me anymore because they're just so small and light and out of the way. And whenever I do off-ice jumps, I'm like, wow, this is so easy. And when I do my jumps in my skates, I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm so weak. And I'm like not as flexible with them on because it adds a few pounds. I think I weighed them one time and they were twice as heavy as my Adea Chorus skates. So they do add quite a bit of bulk. They're not as bulky to skate in as quad skates. They're a little bit bulkier than ice skates just because of the frame, and the frame is a little bit longer than you would have with an ice blade, where the blade kind of ends like at the end of the foot. But yeah, I still love these frames, highly recommend. I will say another good brand is Snow White. Those are pretty much like the Linneas. They have the same style, and if you're trying to inline figure skate, I would go for one of the 3-wheel styles of skates. Not that there's anything wrong with the 4-wheel ones, but the ones that are on the market right now, which are I don't know if I should name names, but I don't like pick skates. I don't like off-ice skates. I think both of those have proprietary toe stops, and they're very tiny toe stops. So if I was skating in one of those two brands, I would have to replace my toe stop literally every day. Like the toe stop is about that big, and they come in different shapes and stuff, which is kind of cool. And the system that they have for them is kind of cool, but you're really limited. You have to order them from the pick or off-ice skate brand. And I could tear through one of those so fast. Also, when I see people skating in them, they look a little bit flat, and the wheels are really small, which you would think would give you better maneuverability, but when there's really small wheels that are very flat rockered, you have like no maneuverability. And I don't know if the wheels are as kind of defined with the profile, or if they're a little just like flatter or more round on the bottom, but from what I can tell watching other people skate in them, they don't look as fluid and they don't look as like nice to skate in, honestly. So I would probably stay away from those two brands unless you're just wanting to learn like crossovers and stuff like that. For very basic skating and for, taking little Instagram videos and stuff like that, those are fine. Those are, more than fine frames to be able to use, but I really prefer the 3-wheel style of frame. There's a few of them. There's Linnea, Snow White. There's also Golden Horse, which I'm actually very interested in. I don't really like how the Golden Horse frames look. They come in gold, and it's like a very bright metallic gold. But they have a frame. Actually, I think they have 2 frames. They have one with 4 wheels that's more like this style. So that's the only one that I would say that I can think of off the top of my head that is a 4-wheel setup that I would actually recommend, or at least that I wouldn't not recommend. And on those, I think all 3 of the wheels actually have some adjustability. You can move the middle wheel kind of like this, but you can also move either the front or the back or both. I don't remember. They have 2 different frames that have adjustable rockers, which I think is really cool. It's not necessarily something that you have to have, but it gives you a little bit more leeway, and it gives you a little bit more of an opportunity to kind of mess around with your frames and not have to try out a bunch of different frames to find the right one. Some frames also don't come rockered at all, so the wheels will be completely flat aligned. I think actually these are like that, but because it has that piece in the middle that lets you adjust the rocker, you can rocker them yourself. But some frames don't have that adjustability, and they also don't come pre-rockered, so you have to buy different sized wheels, and they should usually have some kind of guide on how to do that, but with inline figure skating in general, there's not a whole ton of information out there, and sometimes the things, like even with these Linneas, the sizing chart was outdated, I think. I think that I was looking at a sizing chart for a past model of these whenever I bought these boots, and so the skate tech that I went to, I don't know if it was just that he didn't really know how to put these on because he hadn't done it before, but he said that it was really difficult. He was almost like not going to do it. He was like, I don't think these are going to fit. Like they're not, the frame is too big for the boot. And if you look at it, I don't know if you can tell on here, but the part of the frame right here, it almost hangs off just a tiny bit on like the middle part of this stanchion. Like I can feel the metal part of the frame right there. So it should be a pretty snug fit. It's not the same as an ice blade where it has like a lot of room on either side. But I would prefer to have it have a little bit more space, because then you can have a little bit more leeway with how you're aligning your frame. He was like, there's only one way I can fit these on, so I'm not going to be able to adjust them at all. And you can't adjust these the same way you can with an ice blade anyways. I will also mention something important. If you have a pair of old ice skates and you want to put inline frames on them, go for it. That's great. You can do that for sure, especially if you're just going to use them as kind of like your secondary practicing skate. However, once you have put an inline frame on a pair of boots like this, you cannot go back to an ice blade most of the time. I don't know if it depends so much. I've heard full stop, like, don't put an inline frame on your skates if you want to use them again for ice skating, because it's just not a guarantee that you're going to be able to do it, because it weakens the boot a lot. You have to put more holes in the boot for an inline frame than you do with an ice skate, and you can't adjust them. So once you've drilled those holes are where they're going to be, and you can't put a blade on there and kind of adjust it around with the same holes. Ice blades usually have like one or two kind of slots that have a cutout so that you can move the blade back and forth with the same screws still in the same spot. But these do not, and I don't think that would be feasible. It probably would not hold up because these are just a little bit heavier, and they put a little bit more stress on the boot because of where they're taller off of the ground. The kind of force this way against the boot is higher. They also require these things, which should come with your frame if you buy them, but mine require power wedges, Adea power wedges, and they're just little pieces of plastic. I don't know if you can see them. They're right between the front of the boot. You can see it from this angle right here, that plastic part right underneath. That just gives you the right angle so that the boot is a little bit, it's not like too far towards the toe. And yeah, I think that's about all I can think of for right now. I'm sure I'll remember that there's a bunch of things that I left out, but I've been going for 48 minutes now, so I'm gonna call it here. Let me know if you have any other questions about inline skates, inline figure skating, gear, anything, any other questions that you have, and yeah, I'll see you next time. Bye.